What up, guys? KTOD Matty here. Just wanted to hit you with a deck building video. I thought this would be a good opportunity to go over some of my deck building principles and kind of step by step what I look for in a winning strategy, or something worth testing out, and how I go about making a deck. So I thought we'd make a deck here, just go through my process, maybe something that you guys haven't seen yet, just to kind of go through it. And I'm going to talk about the principles that I kind of live by when making a deck, and then also explain, why certain things are powerful. So one of the first things I do when employing a strategy is I either try to look at the card pool and say, what is the most dense color combination to employ like a winning strategy. Another thing I do is I look at like what leaders, since this game is so centric on leaders, what leaders are really breaking the game, and how do I exploit that? So going to the leader thing, obviously one example would be Chirrut, right? Chirrut is quote unquote an unkillable leader, okay? So what do you do with this? Well, we're going to look into the card pool and see what is the most dense card pool in terms of exploiting this, right? And so one thing you could do is go green, and you have an unkillable leader, right? And a really strong card is Steadfast Battalion. So the idea would be when your leader flips, you can employ a Steadfast Battalion that they can't answer. That's a pretty cool one. And as you dig into green, maybe you might find it works for you in terms of, what you can do with it, or you might say, this is kind of missing some things. And what I found when looking into green was it was really good at doing certain things, but it was missing a little bit of pop. And that was because the card pool density with regard to space wasn't very good, and some of the stronger things in red kind of drew me there, right? Because of cards like Force Throw. So let's look at Force Throw. And we're not making a chart deck. This is just kind of talking through things. Okay. Force Throw is one of those cards where if you have a Force user out, it's obviously insanely broken. It's one resource card that can deal with leader. But the issue with Force Throw, sometimes they kill your Force unit, right? So that's another thing when we're looking at Chirrut. It's like I have a Force user on a stick that's not going anywhere. Okay, so let's pull back now, and let's talk about card density, right? And why I ended up making Green Iden, which I still think is a great strategy. It just needs a little bit of tweaking with the way things currently run. Green, why am I looking at space? Green blue villain has, pound for pound, one of the strongest units in the game in Darth Vader, right? And then when we look at the cards Darth Vader can pull, we get some really interesting combinations. If you have another unit out, right? Snowtrooper Lieutenant can have the other unit attack, and then Vader can still attack. That's pretty strong. That's playing 2 units and getting 2 attacks for 7 resources. That's pretty broken. Okay, this move fell out of favor a little bit with the current pool, but another thing you could have done is grab Veers, and then Vader kills, your Hans, your Leias, etc. Still pretty good, but we're seeing more 7 booty leaders in the meta, like your friend Boba Fett. So what did we do? Well, we have Death Trooper, and now he can take out a 7-drop. So we took green blue, saying, okay, ECL is really strong, Vader's the best unit, and then exploiting Vader's flip. And then as you build out the deck, you have the Imperial themes that you can build upon, and you have issues like you have a space issue, but you have really good Inferno 4. He doesn't trade that well, so you bring in Snowtrooper Lieutenant, and then ECL Star Viper, really good into the green Sabine deck, and not bad against the yellow Sabine. And then you look at the removal, and you have things like Overwhelming Barrage and all that. So that's like a card, that's a soft control card density thing. Another unit that breaks the game, or leader that breaks the game, is Han. Able to ramp as like cheating units out early is very interesting. And then the the part where you defeat a resource makes you think obviously of graveyard recursion, and the best color for that is obviously the green with the nice 6-drop speeder to get back some friends, and then obviously home one. So that's kind of where you would go with that strategy as you, and we've seen those decks, right? I'm not telling you anything you haven't seen, but it's just kind of like, okay, where do we start? We start with someone who can break the game a little bit, and where do we go with it? We start to flesh that out. Okay. So that's kind of where we start with things. Who's another leader that breaks the game? Hera, right? Hera, she can play units of all the specters, and she'll get better as time goes on and there's more specters, but she's somebody who breaks the game. She's somebody I would be looking at every set that drops and says, how can I exploit Hera's ability? So the third thing I would look at in terms of picking a strategy is like pound for pound. And obviously, real quick, Boba, not much has to be said about him. He breaks the game in 2 ways, and one I'm about to talk about. Which leader, pound for pound, when they come out, has the most, raw stats and impact? And I would say that's either Boba Fett or Darth Vader unit, right? A 5/8, pretty insane, and then a 4/7 on 5 is overstated in terms of the rest of the leaders. And then Boba breaks the game in terms of his resource manipulation, right? He can untap. You can do a lot of cool things. You saw my brother's deck that brought in like Recruit to use that one resource to its advantage and then keep fueling the deck. It's really cool. So Boba breaks it in kind of 2 ways, and so that would be, obviously like the gold standard and why Boba is such a good strategy, although we are seeing people start to counter that a bit. And then the other one I wanted to talk about is Darth Vader, and we saw George and Guy and some of those guys make the Blue Vader couldn't get out of my swamp, right? The Blue Vader control deck using blue-red because of its removal card density, right? We talked about card density. And then, what's up, guys? I was editing this video and realized I could have explained card density a little bit better. And so what I meant by that is that when I looked at the blue-red cards, it had the highest amount of removal cards, right? So when I'm looking at a pool and I'm kind of putting the 2 aspects together, I'm saying, what does this color combination do the best of? Where, when I'm looking at the density of the cards, where do they fall? And so I found that blue and red have the best removal. Blue and green have some good removal, and I talked about with Iden, with the blue removal paired with like things like Overwhelming Barrage, so you have kind of some of the point and click removal, and then you have some of the more wide range spread out removal. But then when you look at blue red, it just has all the removal kind of bunch into those colors. So that's what I mean by card density, and I hope this helps. And also pairing it with Vader, who can take over the game by himself, and we've talked about that on this channel. And it is a really cool evolution from the red Iden, where another very similar strategy, Iden's thing was effectively making your base health very high because of her healing, and then taking that and saying, well, how can we do this better, or how can we do this differently? And Vader, once you deploy him, I mean, a 5/8 is gonna hit a little harder than the 4/4, especially when takedowns in the meta. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to do was talk about another important deck building strategy, which is the flip turn, the turn that you deploy your leader, right? You deploy them, you flip them. So when building a deck, we really want to consider our flip turn and how we can maximize that. So the first one I'll use is Chirrut, because I think he has a very interesting flip turn. And really, so he comes out on 5 resources. So we want to be thinking of what can we do with 5 resources to maximize turret. And obviously, right, one of the big things that you want to do on turret is put a Jedi lightsaber on him. So that's your 3, right? Your 3 and the 3-2 split. What else could you do? Well, you could put, some people early days like the electric stuff. Let's just load them up really, really heavy. But then we have cards, right? Like it binds. So that's the 2 in the 3-2 equation. Another card you could put on is Carabast, right? You suit him up, you hit into something, you Carabast, you take out another guy. That would be a 3-2 split. Okay. What if we don't have the lightsaber? For a while, I was playing Luke's lightsaber as another, you turn him into a 6-6, not as good, but still very strong. And then that's your 2 in the equation. And your 3s could be, if you have to remove someone with open fire, if you want to get him even larger, right? And this would go into the 3 category, would be a wing leader. And so wing leader came into the deck where it's your 3 cost, it's a spacer, my bad. Your wing leader is your 3 cost pump for your friend, okay? Okay, so say we don't have any of those, right? What other combos can we do? Well, we can do forces with me. That's a 4, right? Your 4-1. So your 4 is your forces with me. Your 1 would then be your force throw. So seeing how those combinations can work and building your decks, okay, I need my 3s to pair with my 2s, my 4s with my 1s, or, my 2s with my 1s, or vice versa. So it's kind of how the deck starts to come together. Another really good flip turn is our friend Han, right? On 5 resources, you put down the 6 with his ability, you deploy him, you attack, and now you're at 7. So you really ramped up. And then how do we exploit that? Well, people started using U-Wing reinforcement, right? That's a really good one. Or Han unit. So now you got both Hans back to back, jumping out there. But there's other ways you can do that, right? And so one deck that I've been working on with my team and our Discord, shout out to Drelak, shout out to Woo, is Blue Han. And so you can do a similar thing, right? You can deploy him on 6, but sometimes they have stuff to deal with Han. Well, who's a really good blocker, right? Who's somebody who can protect him? Obi, right? And if they kill Obi, now Han's a 6-8, and he's not going anywhere anytime soon. But also, you have the 7 thing with Luke, and you have the 7 thing with Han Solo. So, pretty cool. That's how these evolutions can happen. This is another deck building principle that you need to look at when making a new deck. And then, obviously, you all know about the Boba flip turn, which can happen many ways. One is on 4 resources, you ECL in a super laser tech and take someone out. So you were at 4 resources, you used 3 of them, you got a new one. Oh, you killed somebody with the ECL guy. Boom, you're up to 3. You deploy Boba because you have 5 resources. You attack. You have 5. So that's a cool thing that is another way to look at it, right? So we're on 4 resources. How do we get to 5 and manage that? And then we can play something like a Bosk or, a Steadfast Battalion. So the flip turn, we always have to consider the flip turn and how we can maximize that because, that's what this game is built around, leaders, and we want to consider how they impact the board. Another one is Palpatine, right? Probably the strongest flip. So when you're building a deck, this is someone, going back to principle 1, that you would look at and say, oh man, he has the strongest flip in the game. He steals somebody else. How do we exploit this? And Palp has some really cool flip turns because you can ramp multiple times in one turn and all of a sudden Palp is out there and they didn't even see it coming. So how do we do that? Well, we're playing super laser techs and resupplies and we're sandbagging them a little bit for a sneaky flip. So when building that deck, you have to, and there's many colors of Palp. I like green, I like blue. The green one has more options to ramp really hard with command, but the blue one has a little bit more of that color density removal that I talked about with the item. So, but anyway, how do we exploit these things? So we're going to use that principle as well when we build the deck in a few minutes. All right, so The third thing I really wanted to talk about before we get into building a deck is like, you know, your glue of your deck or your through line, you know, an underlying theme that kind of brings everything together. And we're going to go back to Green Han for this one. And that is going to be talking about the rebel trait, right? Or characteristic or whatever it's called. As we looked at Han and we wanted to add some recursion, right? We wanted to add the U-Wings, and these numbers don't really matter. We're not building a Han deck right now. You notice this guy gets, you know, this guy gets 3 costs or less, and you can get some bigger boys if you go late. This guy gets a 2 cost, and they're both rebels. What are some good 3s to get? Well, that'd be, you know, your Echo-based Defender or your Fleet Lieutenant. Using U-Wing, you want things that can hit the board and immediately impact. Well, who doesn't do that better than those two? So as you start to build the deck, right, and you see things, it's like the through line is the rebel. Now, you can't wing leader an underworld character, but, you know, you can still do a lot with that. So that's one of the things as you see it, you say, okay, who's a broken leader? Who changes the dynamic of the game? Han. What's the best way to do that? One of the best ways is clearly Green with the recursion stuff, okay? What are let's look at the characteristics of our recursion units. They are rebels. And what do they hit? 3 cost units. What are some good 3 cost units? Fleet. You know, getting the Echo-based Defender back, right? Getting wing leader, stuff like that. Now, you could notice their vehicles, and maybe you want to try something with Wedge. And that could be a route you go and you test it and you say, you know, there's just not enough in these colors that's really pulling me that I need to Wedge. Or you could say, like, Wedge is great. These are the things that you have to do in the early stages. Is you need to create these through lines, and then you need to look at your testing and knock things out, right? So let's go back really quick to the Boba Fett example, right? We were playing Boba, and we were finding that sometimes you just ran out of gas. And so, okay, instead of just scrapping the deck and saying, like, you know, I'm not comfortable with a deck that just runs out of gas. Well, how do we keep that going? And then we added in recruit, right? So this is just the first step. And in any good deck, there needs to be the first stages. What are your principles? Then you need to go test it. It's like an experiment, right? You got to go test it. You take your notes down, and you come back here. So that point is to make that, like, Wedge, you know, Wedge is worth trying out. He's a rebel. He enables your units. He's a 5/5 for 5, which is a pretty decent ECL situation. But we're only in one set, and maybe there's not enough vehicles to exploit that. So that would be a card that would be on my list to try, but it may not make the final cut. Okay, so what's our through line? Our through line is rebels. Our through line is potentially vehicles. Interesting theory, right? And our through line is this recursion. So for this deck, I would say rebels would be your glue as you build the deck together to go ahead and finish it out. Another example really quick, obviously, would be, to come back to our old friend, Chirrut would be force users, right? Because of it binds, because of force throw, because of the force is with me, because of Jedi's lightsaber. So that one, pretty easy. But again, like, what has the best density of force users? Actually, yellow does. And so you could look at that because you have, what's his name? Our good friend Ezra. You could actually look at a yellow Chirrut and say, I'm okay paying out of aspect 3 for a force throw. And I've tried this combination, and it is pretty decent. It's in the experiment phase, right? We build a deck, and we experiment. The final thing is obviously another through line, Sabine. You take your, just to kind of explain this example, right? Like, who's the fastest deploying unit in the game or leader in the game? Sabine on 4. What does she do? She pings each base. It's pretty strong. How do we pair that? green ECL with Overwhelm, with K2, stuff like that. And then what's our through line? Our through line is Rebel, cards like Metal Ceremony, cards like Rebel Assault. And that's the glue that kind of fills the deck out. All right, so, we've talked about our principles, and I'm going to start the deck building process. We're going to do a Hera deck, okay? What does Hera do? She breaks the game. She lets you play, what are they called? Specters of all different shape sizes, right? You don't have to pay the penalty. How else can we exploit this? Well, we can get the benefits of probably the best base in the game, and we can get the benefits of the double aspect cards, right? While also playing cards from different aspects. That's pretty exploitable. That's something that no one else can do right now. And as we get more sets, this is something that I would look at trying to exploit even further. Now, I won't say that single command cards are the most powerful right now. Attack Pattern Delta is a really cool card, but the way that the back and forth actions of the game take place, I haven't found very many ways to exploit this card, but it's one to consider. We're in the experiment phase. We try it out. Command, the double aspect command, aspect name cards are actually really strong, and I think Command is one that you should go ahead and start picking up before the next set, because I actually think it's really good. Now, obviously, the removal part of it is a little narrow. It's still a really good card in that it gets to do two things for one action, and it can join many different set of instances. Ramping to get your leader out faster is obviously very strong. We've seen a growing number of control decks with Super Laser Blast, so the recursion, not a bad thing. And then just shooting people down and pumping people up is pretty powerful. So Command would be kind of a linchpin card in this deck. Okay, so we have the leader, we have the main strategy. As we look at these cards, we obviously see two through lines. We see some force users, and we see a lot of rebels, right? Everyone is a rebel. So what's our glue going to be? Our glue is going to be rebels. There is a version that you could definitely go exploiting the force here, and you could do blue Hera, which I think is very strong. But our theory is we want to get the benefit of the double aspect while playing other colors, and we want to exploit ECL with something like Zeb built in 2-for-1, or even one of these guys can be really good. So with our Rebel through line, we are going to look at first our units, and we have a lot of ground units right now, so we're going to go to space. And I would say the green space right now is a tough cookie to crack. I honestly, seeing this right here would almost have me jump off the color, because it is pretty weak. But we know that ECL Star Viper is strong. We know Bright Hope can block a lot of things. We like our wing leader, right, for our rebel theme, and Alliance X-Wing can probably get the job done a little bit to help out. He's a rebel. What pairs well with ships that need a little extra help to trade? Well, we have our fleet lieutenant. Another good rebel boy. As we look on the ground, we want to maximize our first turn plays. Right now we have 3, 6, 9. I'm comfortable with anywhere with a deck that's trying to really get out early. I'm comfortable with like 10 or 11. And what's one of the best 2-drops in the game? That'd be Battlefield Marine. Now we're on 12. We might have to talk about Chopper's role in this whole picture. Okay. Now we're going to look and try to fill out the curve. So I'm going to save this. Where are we at? We are at 45 cards. So we're going to have to make some cuts soon. And as we fill out the curve, another thing to consider is we are not in terrible shape so far. Okay. We have 2 really strong 3-drop units, but we have a good 2 really good follow-up plans if our guys stay alive. And then, our 4 drops are looking pretty good as well. And you don't want too many of them. I think 6 is a good number. You can go up to 8. And it kind of peters off from there. So we have our through line of rebels, right? We have our exploitable strategy. And now we need some events. We need things to do. Whether or not we're running 3 of all these would be something we'll talk about in a sec. But okay, looking at this deck, what does it need? Well, it kind of needs a backup plan if things go south, right? I think U-Wing Reinforcement's really strong. It reloads us after a Wrath effect. Also, we have some cool come into play things that can be really powerful with that ability. But we've noticed like our space isn't amazing. Like this, we have some pretty good pound for pound units. This might be something we consider with her ability when she comes out, with stuff like Wing Leader, stuff like Command. We might consider something like True Strike sometimes can be good to throw attacks into the other sphere, right? When they're arena dodging you. But let's use our Rebel through line. Metal Ceremony, very strong card with Rebels and with ECL. So you get an extra unit that is going to be able to attack and get the benefit of that. And then obviously Rebel Assault, pretty dang good. Okay. So, we're at 53 cards. We're already kind of ahead of the curve. Let's look at what we have. We have Spark of Rebellion. Spark of Rebellion is a great card in the current meta, and is a great card when you are trying to be an aggro player and you need to strip some cards. So we might want to say, is that a sideboard card? Is that something? Do we expect to see a lot of control and we need to keep it in our main deck, or is this something that we want situationally to come in post board against strategies that we are going to see but not as much, right? So I'm predicting that this weekend we're going to see a lot of Sabine decks. So while Spark is a good card, I might say, okay, you know what, Spark can come in against the Vaders of the world, but I am comfortable leaving it out, and with my U-Wing and my ability to get kind of ahead early, maybe I'm okay there. Another card that we've talked about is Attack Pattern Delta. I think we have a pretty good handle on our pumps, right? So I don't necessarily think that is worth it, but it is a card that I would definitely try because you are going for that double aspect. And it could be, let's put it in the sideboard as, hey, we're playing a lot of these kind of gummed up, where'd you go, buddy? We're playing a lot of these kind of aggro matchups, and we need kind of a trump card here. So I'm going to put that in the sideboard if it ever goes down there, which it isn't. Okay, we'll take a break real quick. Okay, so I had a little freeze moment where Attack Pattern Delta was kind of getting stuck going into the sideboard, but I got it fixed. So, okay, we've identified this as a strong card, and we don't know yet how best to exploit it. We can see scenarios where it could be good. So we're going to throw it in our sideboard, but as we test the deck, right, we're going to try to move things around. This is, again, the first phase of the thought process. Another card I want to draw our attention to is Resupply, right? Like, if we are playing against decks that, other mid-range decks that aren't playing Command, Ramp is going to be one of our strongest tools, right? We're going to go ahead, we're going to get a little ahead of them, and we're going to use our ECL with like a Zab sooner than they can to 2-for-1 them, flip Hera, and then step on the gas. So Resupply, while you might not want it in your main deck, we can become this kind of ramp deck out of the sideboard, which is a very interesting strategy to do with Hera. Get her out earlier, get her pumping people, and kind of really lean in on that strategy. So right now we have 9 cards in the sideboard. We have a 50-card main deck. We need one card. Ooh, Mom's pretty cool. Um, that actually leads me to a good thought, and this is going to be a little tangent. Um, there's an interesting idea where like, oh, home one, like you could actually turn into a ramp deck out of the sideboard and use some of these abilities. So like maybe, right? Maybe we want home ones. Maybe we want to be like a sideboard into this transformative home one strategy. So we'll put that there. You know, maybe this is a more situational card. We'll do that. Um, and we already have command. So, you know, so look at that. We have 3 home ones is a lot. But you have a lot of good targets. This is just a very interesting thought experiment to build around Hera, right? So we have 3. So let's go back to one of our things is our, and we're going to start, this is how we get into the 2. So we got the cards we want, and now we're talking about numbers. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 first turn plays. That is a lot, okay? I love Chopper. Chopper doesn't trade so well on the board. We don't have, say, a Tarkin Town to kind of trade back. So, like, to me, Chopper might not even be it. Like, you can do some kind of mill stuff, which gets cool. You can disrupt them. But as I'm looking at this deck, I'm really wondering Chopper's role. Sorry, all you Chopper fans. If we were to get rid of Chopper, that would leave us with only, 9. And our space kind of stinks on ice, right? To the point where if you play some games with this deck and you find space is an issue, like maybe you have to go a different route and we revisit this double green in the future when there's more stuff, more space, more friends to help out. But to me, Chopper is going to at least go down to 2. And as I'm looking at this deck, I'm seeing like, we want some options. We want some versatility for our U-Wing, right? What are some things that hit the board immediately and affect? We have Dodonna. Dodonna's interesting because we're like a rebel deck. Okay, he's a pretty good grab. We have stuff like Mon Mothma that can keep, it's kind of like our recruit. And then Akbar's really interesting, right? Because you can play multiple things. So like maybe we want just one Akbar. So we have our Chopper. If we're a little light, so now we have 10. First turn plays is really high. We can wing leader Chopper, but we also have 2 of the best 2 drops on the ground in the game. So I think that Chopper's somebody that, again, he's a 1 for the U-Wing. He can pair well both. But I think I'm comfortable making him a 2. I think going through the numbers here, I would love to be a deck that didn't play 3 Alliance X-Wing, but unfortunately in this situation we are in, we need to hit that early to have a chance at not getting run over in space, and we have some things to kind of help it out. So this is where I would start with a Hera deck, and then I'd go and I'd play games and I'd kind of mess around with it. Maybe I want my Sparks in the main deck. Maybe 3 Carabast is way too many. Maybe I want some more of this recursion stuff that was really good. Or I do this transformative sideboard and I go, wow, this could be a really good just straight up ramp deck, and I move things around. So this is where I would start. I'd go and I experiment. I'd play games with it. But just coming back to our principles, we picked a leader that can break the game in 2 ways, right? Playing different things, playing things of different aspect while also getting the command double green ability. Pretty cool. Something to look for in the future. And what's our through line? Our through line is Rebel and pumping. And so we kind of, we tried to take advantage of that. And if you're pumping your units, they're a lot bigger. Carabast, they're going to survive, and Carabast lets you kind of, use as your removal. We have a weak space. We want to be able to affect that. So we looked at cards like True Strike. Carabast also does that well. We're using the best, probably the base and the rare base in the game, although they definitely all have their moments. So yeah, I think this was a fun experiment to see a leader that's not being played a lot and how we can go about building them. Because it's Hera, there aren't that many decision trees yet, and it was pretty straightforward, but I think it just illustrates the points well. And we have a plan for our sideboard, and we're going to go experiment with this, and we're going to see how it works. So that's where I would leave you. please let me know in the comments, you know, if you have any principles for deck building that you live by, or any feedback at all. Happy to hear it. And thanks. See you at the tables.